Okay, so hello everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. This is one of our first meetings. We're starting hopefully a series of them with Dr. Reg, and we really appreciate you taking the time to be here and super excited to learn from Dr. Reg. I would like to introduce you to Dr. Reg McDaniel. And it actually was not easy creating a brief introduction for him because he has so many years of research and studies worldwide and has lectured in 15 countries on the topic of aloe and polyase mannan. Dr. Reg is a graduate of the University of Texas Southwestern Medical School and spent 30 years practicing anatomical and clinical pathology. He is also the founder and director of the Fisher Institute, clinical research design consultant, University of Miami Miller School of Medicine, Division of Integrative and Complementary Medicine, and multiple supplement companies. Dr. Reg now devotes his attention to the potential of glyconutrients and other plant micronutrients to restore health for numerous conditions through its support of normal biochemistry, and you'll hear him say that a lot. Before we continue, I just like to just say that Dr. Reg has been quite an instrument in my health and life going forward from goodness since back in 2003. And he has helped me through this comprehensive nutrition. And so I feel very passionate about it. I know that it works, it helps, and has made my life definitely a big change. And I'm very grateful to him for that. We are going to have this meeting probably about, Dr. Reg will speak about 42 to 45 minutes and do his presentation. And then after that, we'll probably save, 10 minutes or so. We want to try to keep this to an hour, not longer. We know that it's late for some people in different parts of the world where you are. So we'll try to get to the questions and answers in the chat box at the end, spend about 10 minutes on that. Without further ado, I give you the floor, Dr. Reg.
She says, hello there. I think to get started, give somewhat of an introduction before we get into the PowerPoint. I have been doing interviews and making an effort to try to share the power of more comprehensive nutrition with the public for nearly 30 years. And I was using too much, I would say, scientific terminology because in common speech, we don't use Greek and Latin terms. So I have decided to try to start with something that everybody is familiar with and try to build from that the ancient scriptures found in the Bible up to 5,000 years ago gives insight into the power of more comprehensive nutrition. And I don't want you to regard me as an expert because I haven't developed or invented anything new. Actually, I've been on a pathway since August 1985. That's 36 years ago, when a company here in Texas had a goal and raised $20 million to do research on aloe leaf gel to try to find out why it had been used for over 5,000 years in multiple nations and civilizations to support various aspects of deviations from normal health. I'm your, messenger and servant. And I like to make a point that I'm not an expert like you've been exposed to by one of the government officials like Anthony Fisher, what's his name, that has changed so many times because experts deal in theories. And as the theories change, their responses change. But what we're talking about is not theory, but theorem. We're talking about things from that there was insight up to 5,000 years ago when in the first part of the Hebrew scriptures, in Genesis 1:29, it talks about that I give you the herbs and the seed-bearing plants that bear seeds. For you it shall be meat. Well, I've given this type of presentation to so many groups that were vegetarians and vegans, and they kind of strangled on that, for you it shall be meat. So I've gone to Hebrew scholars, not just your run-of-the-mill type, but those that study the ancient scriptures. And I have said, is that what the original Hebrew said? For you it shall be meat. And they kind of smile and say, well, no, that's a good terminology that the translators of the King James Version use the term to try to communicate that it was important, because most meals are built around the meat dish in the meal. But to look at the original scripture, it would be more like, for you it shall be sustenance. And sustenance is a much broader term than for you it shall be meat. So what we're talking about is ancient wisdom. Fact is, in Ezekiel 47:12, it speaks of the tree of life and how vegetables and fruits are provided for man in nature for nourishment. And it ends, depending on the translation, and the leaves of the trees shall be for medication or healing. If you kind of negative about something so ancient, in the New Testament, in Revelations 22:2, it speaks of the water flowing beneath the throne in the Holy of Holies of the temple. And it is so nourishing as it flows down to the streams and to the gardens and orchards, that it's so fertilized that they produce every month. But at the end of it, it says, and the leaves of the trees shall be for the healing of the nations. And I mention this because most people are familiar with the King James Version of the Bible and have some confidence in it. And what I'm going to try to attempt to do is to relate this ancient wisdom to modern science that validates what individuals observed long ago. So with this, I would say let's start with the first PowerPoint slide. If you'll bring it on, and I will point out, I mentioned about meat, and that the original is more like sustenance. And I like to also point out the importance of this to every individual, that in John, in the New Testament, it says, brethren, I pray that you may prosper in good health as your soul prospers. Let's go to the second slide now. And as I say, I've done presentations that we started out with medical and scientific terms that are heavy in Latin and Greek, and that's not common street language. And I realize that individuals listening don't want to be biochemists or molecular biologists, healthcare professionals, geneticists, or some PhD specialists. And I'm afraid that if we use too much science and just only science, that information goes in one ear and out the other without little staying in between. And I hope that what I'm trying to get across to you, that you can share this story, that what we have to offer is health, wealth, and worthiness. Now, nutrition is essential because it's the elements of the nutrients, which are amino acids, fatty acids, carbohydrate units, which are monosaccharides or sugars, then elements and vitamins, and very important are special molecules made in plants called phytonutrients that are all combined together and hooked together in cellular synthesis under the control of our genes that give the instruction on how to do this. And this is essential for normal biochemistry and a normal good state of health. But if you have a deviation from health and have to go to the doctor periodically, particularly a young family with children that have to go off, this can be a terrible drain on your finances. And unfortunately, modern medical care is extremely expensive as well as pharmaceutical drugs. And so what we have to offer, you can't get very much more economical than good food and comprehensive nutrition. And the other thing is you can, out of learning about this and sharing it with people that need improvement in their health and wealth, you can get a feeling of worthiness over and over again. I have worked with people that were financially are professionally solid. They didn't need any more money or anything, but they had never had people with tears in their eyes grabbing them or hugging them and saying, thank you for bringing this information to me for all the benefits it is given. Now, unfortunately, our society is drug oriented, legal prescription drugs as well as illegal drugs. And I feel like oftentimes I've been hitting my head against a brick wall with no door that I could find in it to try to share this with people, because there is probably no more freedom and independence that you can express as a common individual than what you eat, how much you eat, and what your choices are. So this is an expression of freedom. And the modern science and establishment medicine really downplay the importance of nutrition, because, as I point out, this amounts to personal, preventive, and interventional health management, which is safe beyond compare. It supports the engineering and design of life that is coded in DNA, or your genes that control cellular synthesis of bioactive molecules that carry on the biochemistry and the physiology of normal life. And I keep emphasizing normal because we don't claim with more comprehensive nutrition to treat, cure, mitigate, or alter and correct an abnormal disease, syndrome, process. What all we do is support normal nutrition to optimize it, to support normal gene activity, normal cellular synthesis, normal health, and normal physiology. So it's very important for you to understand this, because what an individual believes and knows is a function of the brain. It is very powerful, and it influences the operation of your body. You have to be very careful what you know and believe, because if you believe the wrong things, it can be very destructive to your health and your relationships. So next slide, let's go to. Now, what we have here is a very scientific thing. It's the composition of matter that has been all the elements that have been found on Earth and in space. And the simplest is at the left at the top, which is hydrogen, which has one proton and one electron. Very simple structure down to the, as you proceed along, like uranium, which is has 238 electrons, and each little square there is a unit of stable energy that's unique to that element. But most importantly, all these, there's approximately 100 elements here, a little over, have absolutely no properties of life. And the unique thing is that the coding that is in your genes or your DNA can take about 70 of these elements in cellular synthesis and begin to hook them together. And Eureka, one of the major mysteries that human life has ever faced, is how in the world does life appear? Well, one of the things about this thing that I'm sharing with you that started in August 1985 with the Food and Drug Administration trying to make a new drug out of the active ingredient of the aloe vera plant. And it was the middle of the road science and medicine. However, over time, it has turned into a spiritual journey because in the coding of the DNA, there's no question that there is a creative, organizing, and designing power in the universe that started out as a source of plant and animal life. And as I frequently add, that this creative, organizing, and designing power is not some old bearded man like you see on the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel reaching down and touching Adam to start life. This is one of the biggest mysteries that man has ever faced. But this is also, you can't see it, but I have in my hand a palette that an artist can make, and maybe you can see in the small thing there that we have the primary colors there, but the most involved and beautiful creative art that man has ever come up with, that the organizing, designing, and creating power of the universe uses these elements, much like the colors on this palette, to create life in the universe. And that's why I say this middle of the road science has turned into a spiritual journey to recognize that the biggest mystery that has ever faced man is how this chart of the elements can end up by this creative process to create plant and animal life. Next slide. Now, this is from a major review article published in 1985 by a husband and wife biochemistry team called Stephen and Ron Cornfield, and that every cell in your body is like an ultra micro little factory. And at the left center there, you see a cartoon of a cell, and there are many different shapes of cells in the body, but they all have a central nucleus where the DNA or the chromosomes stay, much like the reference library. And I say reference library because the chromosomes that are written in DNA do not come out of the nucleus. And you can't check out the reference books in the library, but you can make a copy and take them to your office or your home to work with. And lo and behold, in the organizing principle of life, a copy is made of the DNA that's called RNA, and it comes out of the nucleus and it is taken to the assembly line that is in every cell of your body. And the cartoon of the cell is what you can see at about 1,000 magnifications with a light microscope. But it is surrounded by an area in the cell that looks like there's nothing there, but with proper stains and with about 100,000 magnification with electron microscope, you can see that there is an assembly line there that starts with number one, the ribosome, where amino acids are hooked together to make peptides that increase in molecular weight and length and molecules. It becomes protein. But the second step, which is at the top of the thing there, is called endoplasmic reticulum, or ER. And there is where carbohydrates or sugar units are added to the amino acids. And then you go over to the right, and you have the membranes of the Golgi apparatus, which is the third and final assembly line step that's in every cell of your body. Now, one of the reasons I show you this is that in the center, it looks like there's kind of a little pitchfork thing with little round circles and all. It's in 3 chains. And in this article, it points out that something that when I found this, I couldn't sleep for about 2 or 3 days back in the 1980s, because it points out that the active molecule that we found in the aloe plant, which was acetylated mannose, that for short we call ace-mannan, that 9 molecules on this assembly line are put together in the endoplasmic reticulum in 3 chains to make a domain that is on the surface membrane of every cell in your body. Now, we don't have all of these on the cartoon because it'd be like shag carpet. You couldn't see them, but you can see sticking out, looks like little tiny pitchforks, that this is a domain for cell to cell communication made from 9 molecules of what is in the active ingredient of the aloe leaf gel. And this domain carries out harmony and balance between all the cells of the body. If you think about it, if you got trillions of cells in your body, which we have, you need them all cooperating and working together. And that's what this incredible domain does. And it's made from the active ingredient from the aloe plant. And this was in Annual Reviews of Biochemistry, 1985, and it has over 300 citations in the previous years where different scientists slowly developed the assembly line concept that you see there, because at the bottom of the page, you see a membrane and different things that all the structure and function molecules of life are made, but this domain is very important. And the father of human physiology was named Dr. Hans Selye, and he spoke of 2 points that are particularly remembered over the decades. First, the stress of life, and the other is balance between all the cells that he called homeostasis. And this homeostasis is carried out between all the cells by this domain that's on the surface of every cell in your body for cell-to-cell instructions and harmony, and to create homeostasis within the body. Now, to try to get a feeling for how important this is one of the best examples of the lack of homeostasis is a mutation in the DNA that creates a malignant cell. And when it begins to divide, it doesn't respect the other cells, and it invades them. And this becomes what is known as cancer or malignancy. Well, fortunately, this active ingredient from the aloe supports normal function of the genes and the DNA, and it is very important to keep homeostasis within the body, and that's why finding this active ingredient in the aloe, which we concentrate, because it's a very low level in the aloe leaf gel, that it is so powerful to support normalization of the health, because it normalizes the biochemistry and the physiology of the body. The next slide. If you have a little ultrafactory, as I call each cell, because depending on which gene is activated and brought into activity is what is combined to make the bioactive molecules. And so you realize right quick there's got to be a blueprint and design for these little factories, and every one of them has 6 chromosomes or 23 pairs. And what we see here is one white cell from the peripheral blood that you put into tissue culture, and you put a stain on it so that under UV light, the chromosomes will fluoresce and you can see them. Well, what you do is you take a photograph of a squash of these fluorescent 46 chromosomes, and you begin to cut them out, and you make what's called a karyotype of the 46 chromosomes, which are over at the left. You take the longest one for number 1, and you work down as they get shorter and shorter. And if you'll notice down at the bottom line to the right, there's a tiny little Y chromosome, and we know that this is a white cell from a male, because there would be 2 X's there just looking alike if this was a female. But this is the basis for the instructions or cellular synthesis that that little cell assembly line that I showed you. And depending on which gene is activated is which amino acids, which fatty acids, which sugar molecules and elements and vitamins and phytonutrients, or how they're hooked together to make all the different compounds that carry out the biochemistry of life. So here are the programs. It's in every cell in your body. Next slide, please. Now, each of these chromosomes, this is the theory, 3 different types of graphic representations. The blue in each one of them is phosphorus molecules. And what we have here in DNA is essentially a biocomputer. The hardware is the blue that you see, and you see they show that the molecules in the middle one. And again, it goes to showing how the molecules are present. And this is the phosphate is much like the hardware of the program in your handheld computer, such as a cell phone or a laptop or a slate or a desktop. This is where the instructions are. And inside the phosphate molecules are the nucleic acids that are the round circles there, and they show them as plates in the first illustration there, where the 4 bases of nucleic acids, the adenine and 4 of them are a code, and you can see in the gold how they're in the middle. So you have the hardware in the blue, the programs that are written in the DNA in the middle, and this is how the karyotype or the chromosomes that you saw in the fluorescent picture is organized. And again, this is an incredible detail of the basis for life that only a creative organizing and designing power could put together. The idea that a bunch of molecules, and you can see how many there, decided to get excited and organized is contrary to how things happen in nature. And as I say, this has been a spiritual journey that I'm trying to share with you that starts back with observations from 5,000 and 2,000 years ago by empiric observations that science is validating ancient wisdom. Next slide, please. Now here is just a model of a cell showing how all this assembly line and different structures there are organized. And again, another cartoon of a cell. And on the surface, you see these structures sticking out. Well, these are chains of sugars that are present also in aloe leaf gel. It is known not only as the mannose or acetylated mannose, about 40 to 50% of the saccharides or sugars that are in aloe leaf gel, but current technology can show you that there's at least 9 additional monosaccharides that are on the surface of the cell that is the antigenic signature of who you are. What I'm trying to get around to is that there has never been on Earth one alive now or will be born that the organization of these sugars on the surface of the cell are identical. Every person is a little bit different, and this is why you hear of people in the family, or if they have to have organ transplant, they do some work to try to find out if their genetics are close enough that they will not reject the cells just immediately. And every human being is different. Now, in the cell, in the center of it, you see a round area. It says nucleus. That's where all the chromosomes are present, and that's what I call the reference library where the DNA is made. And then a complementary copy is made by RNA that comes out of that round nucleus out to this assembly line that is present in the cytoplasm of the cell. Also, it takes energy to do all of this. And you'll see right at the top, it says mitochondria. These mitochondria are very special things, and there are multiple ones in the cells, particularly in the muscle cells, because you need a lot of energy, because the mitochondria reverse the energy transfer that happens on Earth, that a very narrow band in the green from the sun, a frequency of light, hits a chloroplast, and then carbon dioxide that we, as a carbon and 2 oxygens attached to it that we breathe out with each breath. In photosynthesis, the carbon of carbon dioxide in photosynthesis are hooked together with a little bit of energy from the sun between each carbon as it makes a chain in photosynthesis to make the center of amino acids, the chain of carbons, the center of the fatty acids, and also the carbons of the carbohydrate. That's how they're made. But the mitochondria reverses this process of putting energy into the carbon chain and transfers that energy to phosphate molecules that are called ATP, adenosine triphosphate, which is the molecule that runs the energy for all the metabolism of the cell. And so that's what you have trillions of, and we've been following through why modern science is validating observations that were made eons ago. Next slide. Now, this organizing, designing, creating process, Christians have called this power God, and the Jews have called it Yahweh. But what I'm trying to tell you that this middle of the road science has become a God's plan for health and healing, whatever this power is. And it's an undeniable source of how in the world the heavenly bodies of the sun, the moon, the various planets, and animal and human life developed. And one of the first things that struck me was I did not know before this that the DNA in the plant kingdom is exactly like the DNA in the animal kingdom or in each of our human cells. That gives you something to stop and think about. If you created life once. Why would you start all over again and do it a different way? So the DNA, and I won't go into the experiments that have shown that you can take DNA from a human, put it into a plant, and it will make the protein or the enzyme that can be extracted and can be injected into a child that's deficient with this genetic defect, and it will correct the problem that the child will develop normally. But it's identical DNA, and that in the plant kingdom, the macromolecules as well as the minor molecules that are required on the assembly line, that is cellular synthesis, that what the code of the genes require to make bioactive molecules are found in the plant kingdom. This gives you a lot to think about. So the question is, you might ask, is modern science showing that biblical scripture is valid? And I think I'm trying to get across to you that it is validating what has been observed by human beings for eons. Next slide, please. Now, in our work at Carrington Laboratories, that I was called in as a consultant, as a medical physician, to interpret first basic science that 12 different institutions were doing on contract, because Carrington raised $20 million to try to develop this new drug. And we found out what I've been showing you of how the acetylated mannose is used to make this domain. And we were progressing along in the FDA process, but one of the first problems we had is we saw no toxicity. And number two, every deviation from normal in humans' experience, whether it was physical, mental, or emotional, would improve by adding this to the diet to supply what the genes require, because this is such an important molecule in the homeostasis of life. I might add that because of no toxicity and too many good things happened, we were kicked out of the FDA, because both of these points are pharmaceutical and medical heresy. I didn't realize before getting involved in this that medicine is organized one drug, one disease. And when it gets into infections and antibiotics, it can be even worse than one drug or one disease, depending on where you found the organism, in which organ or which system. You might use a different antibiotic drug. So everything was getting better when we supplied this active sugar, acetylated mannose, from the aloe plant. Well, it's a long story how it came about, but in 1994, legislation was given for the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, and this is called DSHEA. This was opposed by the FDA, the National Institutes of Health, the American Medical Association, especially Big Pharma, and the entire sickness industry. However, this law has a preamble, which I want to point out to you, that has a statement of fact and truth that I'm trying to share with you. And what it basically says in the first paragraph is that science and medicine has proven that optimal nutrition is necessary for good health, to prevent disease, and to restore good health. You might quickly ask, what more would you want? And that's what I've been sharing with you. But it's in the preamble, and the preamble is just a statement before the law is written of why hearings and this was even considered. It is not part of the law. In the DSHEA law, in the labeling section, I paraphrase again, it says only an FDA sanctioned pharmaceutical can claim to treat, cure, or ameliorate a disease, syndrome, or improve an abnormal health condition. This is law and it's brutally enforced by the FDA. Fact is, the company that I was consultant for and worked with for a decade was fined $10 million by the FDA because they were marketing the active ingredient from the aloe plant. And they said too many good things are happening. People are talking about it. This violates this section in the labeling section of the dietary supplement law. And that is just a crony capitalism and tribute that is paid to the influence and power of not only big pharma, but the entire sickness industry. But the importance about this is I go to great lengths to not use any disease terms or syndrome terms. For example, you never say diabetes, which is a codable disease. You can say biomarkers like I have a problem with the too high levels of glucose. That's just a biomarker. It's not a disease term. If you had, say, multiple sclerosis, you never use that term because it's against the law. You could say, I have a problem about being able to feel or move certain parts of my body, and it's getting worse, or it comes and goes, and a person can figure out. And the reason I mention those two things is that the supply of the active ingredient from the aloe, the acetylated mannose, has been found to be a benefit to move cellular synthesis of bioactive molecules to the normal homeostatic zone. So never use any disease terms when you're asking about, just talk about what problems you have and what your symptoms are. All right, next slide. I asked the question, does the Bible provide vital guidance? And the reason I'm saying the Bible is it's the most published and translated document on the planet. And most people accept information there. And so I'm trying to bridge from what you know and believe to modern discovery of how important and powerful more comprehensive nutrition is. And this is a creative power, is the best I can say, because I don't have the answer of what this is. I don't think it's of the dimension that we live in, of man, but I point out in this next paragraph that the translators of the King James Bible were trying to get across to an uneducated world, primarily in 1611. And this creative power provides for us, much like a father does for his family, or a master for his servants, or a benevolent king for his subjects. And a German theologian said what they were searching for were words that would be the charisma or the core message of this creative power, that what I'm getting across is undeniable. Each person listening is walking proof of this creative power of what's going on in every cell in your body. And it's supported by more comprehensive nutrition. And though they have anthropomorphized this power by Father, Master, King, Lord, what they're trying to get across is this creative power that I'm trying to share with you. And it's very important that I've checked into the yeshiva schools of the Jewish youth, and they go to great lengths to try to point out that Yahweh is a spirit or a power beyond the human domain. And it is a challenge of comprehension to understand just how powerful more comprehensive nutrition is in this molecule from the aloe plant that was put there by the creative power in the universe. And I'm trying to get across to you, it's not a new idea. That's why I say I'm a servant and messenger to you to let you know that not only does this exist and science is proving it, but it has been long recognized by human beings. Um, I go into, we're getting, how much time do we have left? Only 5 minutes. Maybe at another time, I will go into that in Genesis 17, that Abram and Sarah that came from Ur and were told to go to the west, and they found these wells, area that is now Israel's thing, but they were in the 80s or some say nearly 90s, and the angel came and said, "You're going to have a child," and they laughed. They were too old. However, she got pregnant. She had a child. It was called Isaac. And then the Lord spoke to Abraham and says, on the 8th day, and we'll have to say that to the next thing about all the important aspects that modern science and medicine's found out the importance of the 8th day from this scripture 5,000 years ago. So yes, and how modern medicine has been able to prove the value of this guidance given at that time.
Sorry to interrupt, but somebody has their phone unmuted. So if everybody can please make sure, I'm not sure of the person's name. So please mute yourself.
Anyway,
thank you.
This is part of another, I think we were getting to the end of the time that we have available, but this is one of the story of the most detailed validation that I've been able to find that starts out in the instructions given to Abram that became Abraham, as he was told on the 8th day to circumcise Isaac and himself, all his servants, and all the tribal members from that day forward, and what impact that has had throughout the ages. And I won't go into that story now, but what we should do is, I think, stop and say, I have told you what I think is important, but what is more important are your questions. And though I could go on and on for literally days, I may not address what you're interested in. Of course, I know particularly you're interested in what can this more comprehensive nutrition do for me. So if we have some questions, I am ready to try to respond to them. But I will be very careful because we do not treat, cure, or mitigate any disease or abnormal health condition. That's against federal law in this country. But we do provide optimal nutrition to support normal biochemistry and normal physiology of the human body. And when you're in the normal zone, what I might add is that our genes are organized much like the thermostat on your wall in your house or the climate control in an expensive car, that if it gets too hot, the air conditioner turns on. If it gets too cold, the heater turns on to put you in a comfort zone. Well, the genes are organized that if you have the nutrients in your molecule, the nutrients are required to increase or turn on biochemical activity, but it also requires nutrients to turn it down or reduce it. And it's not a comfort zone that the genes attempt to put in the body, but a balanced normal zone, which Anselier called homeostasis. And when you're in homeostasis, you have good health, you have energy, optimism, and you don't have some of these terrible and minor deviations from normal. Paula, do you have any questions or?
No, maybe you might want to explain to people what comprehensive nutrition is, and how that they can help, themselves, by taking that. What would it do for them,
Very good. I'd like to point out that in the 1940s, when I was growing out, nearly all the grocery stores were owned by some local family, and they had very few things they sold that didn't come from, say, 50 or 100 miles around. And there were many fruits and vegetables and items you only could have about 4 to 6 weeks a year during the growing season. What has changed? Well, our markets now are national chains. Agricultural has been developed, and lo and behold, you can go down to the market 12 months of the year and you can have watermelon, you can have strawberries, blueberries, raspberries, go on and on, 12 months of the year. What has changed? Well, they follow the growth zones, and through fast transportation, they pick them green. They pick the fruits and vegetables green. When the fruits and vegetables are picked green, the principal molecule in it is chlorophyll. And so what we're doing with dietary supplementation is that you allow the fruit or vegetable to mature on the plant so that the genes in the plant can put the vital phytonutrients that our cell genes call for in cellular synthesis in it. And by freeze drying, you can put this in a dietary supplement and correct the fact that what looks good in the modern market was picked when it was green and the nutrients are not in it. So that is the power of more comprehensive nutrition built around the, and it's called freeze drying, because you have to freeze the plant material and then put it under a vacuum to take the water out of it. And this keeps the vital nutrient properties of the molecules in it. And that's why frozen food and fresh canned have more nutrients in it than a lot of times those items that are in the market that look good, but you take them home and they're somewhat tasteless. One of the best examples is tomatoes. Tomatoes are picked green when there's principally chlorophyll in them. They're held in the back of the market until they are red enough to fool you. You take them home and they're tasteless. Not everyone knows the difference in taste of a good vine ripened tomato versus one that's picked green and allowed to turn red, and it's not on the plant. So I have not been able to find the paper, but I have been told that Rutgers University has a huge nutrition and agricultural division, and that by special instrumentation, that the vine ripened tomato contains 200 nutrients that are absent in the green picked tomato. Well, this is not as obvious in other fruits and vegetables as it is in tomatoes, but this is repeated over and over again. And this is one of the reasons you can restore to the modern diet nutrients that the genes call for by freeze drying to a powder and putting it either in capsules or gummies or powders that can, in fact, is the research that I've been involved in has taken the acemannan or acetylated mannose from the aloe plant as a powder and mixed it with other plant powders that were plant matured, and you get responses that no medical center on earth can do with pharmaceutical, because you work through supporting the engineering and design of normal life, that the genes produce or give instructions for cellular synthesis to hook these nutrient molecules that are in the supplements together to make the correct bioactive molecules that produce good health through normal biochemistry. I hope that's a response to the question you asked, Paula. But that is the power not only of more comprehensive nutrition, but of why dietary supplements are so powerful and can do such wonderful things that no toxic pharmaceutical has ever touched. Another question.
Thank you for that. So anybody have a question that they would like to ask Dr. Reg? You can either put up your hand or write it in the chat box.
Particularly like your questions because I would like to be responsive to what you're interested in. What I have done today is told you things that I've been doing since 1985, but it may not be all that much interest to you because, as I say, it's human nature of what can this do for me? And I hope your questions can be focused on, and I will try to respond to them with the limits, within the limits of our laws. And I hope that you will give it the symptoms instead of a diagnostic term. Does Carolyn have a question?
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah, thank you.
Should I just say it or type it?
Carolyn, go ahead and say it. That's
Okay.
fine.
Dr. Reg, how much can we trust organic labeling in our foods today?
Well, that's a good question. I went to an organic farm that was charging about 20 or 30% more because they were claiming that, and first we should say that all plant material is organic. What they really are trying to say is that we raise this without toxic poisons. Well, we got out there and underneath all the squash plants were this white powder that they told me was an insecticide. They say it's not on the fruit or the plant, it's on the ground, and that you can't raise squash because of the squash bugs unless you put insecticide on the ground. Well, I don't know whether this really should qualify for being called pesticide and insecticide free fruits and vegetables, but the California standard is that they test them in the laboratory for the presence of herbicides and pesticides, and you can't detect any. And that's would be a organic, but all fruits and vegetables, because organic is a term that really means that there's life that produce this, and so all plants are basically organic. What you're looking for is pesticide and herbicide free, and the best way to do that is that in certain areas they in the laboratory test them to make sure that there are not pesticides and herbicides. And why is that important? Well, our liver has developed over the many generations molecules that either detoxify or bind to and make toxic molecules inactive and are not toxic to our body. However, in our modern organic chemistry, we have solvents and cleaners and paints and various molecules that are made in the organic chemistry laboratory, that hundreds of new ones are made each year, And through the years, our livers and our bone marrow and our lymph nodes have not been able to make molecules that detoxify or like a pair of scissors cut up complex organic molecules that are designed to keep plants from growing or kill insects or withstand too hot, too wet sun rays that are made in new products. And when we take them into our body, our body does not make, it hasn't developed detoxification molecules that over centuries and eons that with slow development of life, our livers have coped with toxins that it slowly came in contact with. And we have too many things thrown at it. And we have syndromes in some people called multiple chemical sensitivity syndrome. I knew a doctor in Dallas, his whole practice was on this. And his patients, they drew blood in glass bottles instead of plastic bottles, or they would collapse from residual material in plastics. And he had the problem himself, and he wore seersucker cotton suits that were washed in water that had been run through charcoal to take any trace chemicals out of it. And he did not use typical commercial soaps. He used Castile, very pure soap to clean his things, because he was so sensitive to it and was aware of this. And there are other people like this that would come to him and he would try to help them. In fact, he had a area south of Dallas made up of mobile homes that were built in the 1930s. And over the years, all the solvents in the paints and in the surfaces, they didn't have plastics in them and all. And they were able to live in these things and not have allergic and toxic reactions to molecules in our environment. And he had a freezer in his home where he had bear meat from Alaska and salmon from the streams in Alaska to try to avoid trace solvents or cleaners and all that are used in processing of food, because he had this multiple chemical sensitivity. And that's one of the things that they try to avoid by having organic, and I call it the California standard for organic fruits and vegetables, which really means pesticide and herbicide free. I hope that's a response to that question.
Dr. Reg, thank you so much for doing that. There's somebody who wrote in the chat box, can you repeat what you said about aloe vera? I'm not really sure what part, but if they would like to elaborate on that.
I'll point out that in 1985, this little company in Irving, Texas, sold, it was called AvaCare, and they sold 12 products made from the leaf gel of the aloe vera plant. And they made a beverage called Carolo. And in 1984-85, the president of this company, who was named Clinton Howard, better known as Clint Howard, got notes from 7 different patients with AIDS from 7 different states that I was on my deathbed dying from this new disease, which there's no treatment and nobody knows what caused it. And I drank your Carolo aloe leaf beverage, and now I'm off of my bed. I am back at work and in school thought you'd want to know. Well, he came to me at Dallas Fort Worth Medical Center and said he wanted me to help him because he had gone out and formed a new company called Carrington Laboratories, raised $20 million from investors to hire on contract academic institutions, which he had found 12 of, to study the aloe leaf gel and try to find out what was in it. And he came to me and wanted me to help him. And I said, no. I said, you need to go to a medical school, get an infectious disease specialist. Nobody knows what causes acquired immunodeficiency syndrome, which we call AIDS, but its epidemiology suggests it's a virus and is spread much like serum hepatitis that is a bane in medicine. But nobody knew that, and it was some time before the HIV-1 virus that is attributed to the AIDS syndrome. And Southern Research Institute in Alabama was able to do research to show that the active ingredient, the acetylated mannose, prevented infection from the AIDS virus if you had human cells that already had been infected with the AIDS virus, that this active ingredient from the aloe stopped the activity of disease in these cells. They would appear normal instead of viral infected, and that in fact with special stains were able to show that in the presence of the active ingredient from the aloe, that the cells threw out or got rid of the viral proteins. Well, before it was over with, the principal institution that was working under contract, which was Texas A&M School of Veterinary Medicine, were able to show that every virus they had on hand that were in various animals and plants, that it was do the same thing, prevent infection, stop infection, clear the protein out of, it didn't matter which one of these viruses. And then the medical school in Lubbock and in San Antonio and others were able to show that not only was it antiviral, but it was antibacterial, antifungus, antituberculosis, and ultimately, out of orphanages in Africa, we found out that malaria, chronic malaria in children, it did the same thing, that these kids that were bedfast, and I didn't know it before we had this relationship with these orphanages in Africa, that the #1 cause of death on earth, according to the World Health Organization, is chronic malaria. Well, these children quit having fever and chills and red cell destruction. They could no longer find the parasites in their blood. They began to grow, get out of bed, go back to school. And we eventually got reports that they excelled in athletics as well as their academics. And so the studies by these academic institutions said that what this active ingredient from the aloe would do, the acemannan, boosted host defense against any type of infection. And we thought we had the most potent support for nutrition of the cellular synthesis for host defense against infections. But then we started hearing from people with asthma, with people with autoimmune diseases and allergies and multiple chemical sensitivities saying, I added this to my diet and I improved. Well, this group of conditions or deviations from normal are an over-functioning immune system. So here we were getting benefits to boost the immune system. And then we had people that had a too active immune system inappropriately responding to triggering substances responding. And I was so confused that I went to Europe for a week-long conference just on the biochemistry of the host defense and inflammatory response. And what I found out was very fundamental, is that it takes nutrient molecules to make the cascade or multiple steps to turn on host defense. And it also takes nutrient molecules to make the compounds to turn it off, to try to find a point of watchful waiting, which I was pointing out before, like the thermostat on your wall in your house for the comfort zone. This is the normal zone for your body's host defenses to be watchful waiting in a normal zone that's not suppressed or not too active. And what we had, not an immune stimulant or an immune suppressant, we had an immune modulator. And the importance here is that in the genes, the programs are written to get to this homeostasis basis of balance. And I hope that's a response, maybe more than you ever wanted to know, about our earliest research, trying to figure out in these 12 academic institutions to answer to the FDA our efforts to try to make a new drug from the active ingredient from the aloe vera, which was found to be acetylated mannose. And I told you then we got thrown out of the FDA because it was non-toxic. And too many good things happened because it supported homeostasis in the body that I tried to explain to you. And it's in the dietary supplement industry, and it's incorporated everything that I've done over these 36 years have been added to it as I have talked to people that when they found different things that the active ingredient from the aloe alone did not correct their problem, that there were other plant-made molecules that could be added to it, which are all listed in the ingredients that I have developed over the years to make the current dietary supplement, which is remarkably of benefit. I hope that is an elaboration on what wanting to know more about the aloe. And maybe again be more than you wanted to know, but I had a friend that I worked with in this, and he says, don't ask questions of Dr. McDaniel. Ask me. I'll give you a quick answer. If you ask him how to build a fire, he'll start by telling you how to plant the right kind of trees to make the right kind of matches to make the fire. And so I maybe tell you more than you want, but I'm trying to respond to your question. You got another question?
I don't know. Is there, oh, Carla has just unmuted herself.
Hi. I have another aloe question. Okay. I have aloe plants in my backyard that I just actually noticed yesterday. Can I cut the meat from that aloe and put it in smoothies?
Yes, you can. I need to share this with you because there are countries where aloe just grows wild, and one of them was in Ethiopia, and they had babies there that their mothers had died of AIDS, and they had some of the symptoms of AIDS, and so working with them, we got some industrial wearing blenders, and what they would do is they would go out and break the leaves or cut the leaves off of the plants and take a carrot scraper and take the green cuticle off of it, and you have a fillet there, and drop the fillet into a wearing blender and add the powder for the childhood milk substitute, and the symptoms of the babies of AIDS would go away, and eventually they would be negative. But one of the problems is that the gel from the aloe plant is 99 to 98% water. And the solids in the gel are 1 to 2%. And the acemannan is a portion of this 1 to 2%. So it's important in our processing that what we're able to do is that we can make a powder where you can have either a capsule or a teaspoon, and it would take you several days or weeks to consume enough native aloe gel.
I got you. Okay.
99% water, but the processing, we concentrate the active ingredient, and you can, like I say, put in a capsule tonight, but it could take you days to take of the native material. Now, having said that, I've had people from other countries come to me and say, oh, my grandmother had aloe every day, and she lived to be 90, where most people were dying in their 40s and 50s, and she was never sick, and but she ate aloe over a lifetime, and with that low percent, years and decades of taking a low percent, you can get a load of the active ingredient in your body. But most people would like to get over any deviation from normal they have as fast as possible.
Yes.
And there is a equation in biochemistry called the Michaelis-Menten substrate supply dynamics. And what this basically is a curve that I didn't understand when I was in undergraduate biochemistry. I didn't understand in medical school, but in the nutrition, I really understand this. In fact, it's a whole chapter in the medicine book about all the equations of the Michaelis-Menten substrate supply. And I can explain it to you. If you had to make, let's say, 20 apple pies for an event that's going to be next week, if you went down to the grocery store and you bought the ingredients to make one pie, and you came home and you made it, and each time you made a pie, you went to the grocery store, it would take you a long time to make 20 pies. However, if you went down to the grocery store and you bought all the material to make 20 pies, you could make them faster, couldn't you? And this curve flattens out, because if you can only get 4 pies in your oven to brown the crust, it will flatten out. That's why that curve rises fast and then it flattens out. But you can even make it go higher if you use your neighbor's thing, and you can do 8 pies at one time. And so what we do by increasing the concentration by the processing of the active ingredient from the gel, we're essentially, like in the analogy I gave you, going down to the grocery store and getting the stuff to make all 20 pies. And your cells operate much like that. If there's a greater supply, it can make more of what needs to be made faster and quicker. And that's why dietary supplements are so powerful, because they're usually a very small percentage in a plant, but by the processing of freeze drying and the extraction we do, we increase the amount that's available, and your cells can make the defensive antiviral or healing molecules faster. Fact is, when I say healing, one of the oldest uses is that Alexander the Great, before our calendar started, from Greece, had in his war train aloe plants because they grew in big pots, because arrows and swords and spears were the type of wounds his army got in that time of fighting. And they found out that the gel from the aloe could speed the healing of the wounds much faster. And so that's some of the oldest use of aloe. And it's been recognized, as I said, when we started out in different civilizations and nations, for up to 5,000 years, it can be documented that there's something in there. And this company that I was asked to be a consultant, with the help of all these academic institutions that they were paying to do research, you can't do research unless you've got money. And they had raised the money to do the research on the aloe to find out what was in it that's so important. And that's what I have a series of lectures that I can follow up with this brief introduction to try to get across to you the details of the biochemistry and composition of why this works in your body to normalize virtually every system. There are 7 major systems in the body, and in the biochemistry of life that is coded in your genes, this 9 molecules of this ace mannan are on the surface of a domain of every cell to try to reach the balanced or normal zone. And when you're in the balanced or normal zone, you don't have deviations from normal. That is very powerful.
Cool. Thank you.
I hope that there is interest, and we have about 15 or 20 additional lectures that are PowerPoint to try to show you that modern science is validating the general terms from biblical times, that the leaves of the trees, that's what this is, a leaf of the aloe plant, is for the healing of the nations, or can be used to in place of medication, because the genes are programs to normalize the biochemistry and physiology of the body.
Cool. Got it.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, guys. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
it.
Well, thank you. Glad you enjoyed it. I guess we better start wrapping it up. Unless, I know we don't want to keep everybody too long. We said an hour, but we really appreciate you, Dr. Reg. Also, if in case anybody has some questions that they really wanted to have answered, and maybe time just got a little bit too much, Dr. Reg has kindly offered his email address. You can email him, and that would be rmcdaniel@wellnessquest.org, and I can put it in the chat, so you can have that.
If there's interest in more PowerPoint lectures about more comprehensive nutrition built around the active ingredient of the aloe, I would be delighted to give those to you in the future, much like this session here.
Yes, and if thank you. And if you would like some more of these presentations by Dr. Reg, please let us know, and we will be happy to do that, even if it's once a month, maybe, and spend a little time. And these days we all have to sort of take our own do our own due diligence for our health, as some of you are already seeing, and making sure that we get the right comprehensive nutrition, and we don't make any claims. But I know for myself that this has helped me, and it's helped since 2003. And so it's changed my life and got me on this path for nutrition and wellness. And I feel very passionate about sharing it and helping others, just the same as Dr. Reg has been doing And I'm going to share his email in the chat box so you could mark it down as well.
Can I ask a quick question?
Quick statement there asking for the email again. And if you'll say capital R and all the rest of them lowercase, it's easier to see it. Capital R McDaniel, McDaniel,
Got it.
at Wellness Quest, WELLNESSQUST.org. And if you want to communicate, I'll be happy to hear from you. And if you want to have additional PowerPoint lectures, be sure and let Paula know. And whatever I can do, just remember what we have to offer is health, wealth, and a spirit of worthiness as you help others find out what this can do for them.
Yes, I agree. That's the main thing. It's once you have that feeling that you want to help others, that's the best way. And we have a much happier life. We feel better about ourselves. We share with everybody else and they feel good. And it just creates a great energy going forward.
Paula,
So-
can I say something real quick, please?
Yes, sure.
So I got my new Eden today, and there's a paragraph, no single thread makes up the cloth of good health. And that really resonated with me, Dr. Reg, that you said seek pure air, clean water, exercise, etc., etc. Just that balance, and because a lot of times you hear people say, take this, take that. But, while we have this ingredient, even that balance of life. And I want to let you know the last sentence says, never take this nutrition on an empty spirit. So I put it down, I said my prayer first, and then I took it.
I love that.
Make sure it worked. Yeah, but thank you very much. I have it, and I'm excited and ready for this journey.
Oh, thank you so much, Carolyn. That is awesome. And I love that you brought that up so everybody can hear, because this is what who Dr. Reg is. It's about helping others. And when he signs his emails, he always signs it with the word serving. And I just find that so profound and very humbling. And that's exactly how he is. And I respect you, Dr. Reg. And you have truly made my life better, my health, with all your research and your time and what you're spending the time here. And I know we went over longer, and I thank all of you who have taken your evening. Most people have stayed on. And so I really personally appreciate that. Thank you for your valuable time spending with us. I see somebody did actually write something in here. I don't know if it was to me, I'm not sure. Somebody said, does it have to be fresh aloe from the plant, or can we buy aloe vera juice?
Want me to respond to that?
Yes, please. Yeah, and we'll try to make it as brief as possible because I don't want to keep anybody right. I don't know I know you don't know the word brief when answering questions.
There is a paper published by an author named Lushbach that was in the journal Cancer back in the 1950s. And what it was, they were doing in New Mexico, the atomic bomb explosions. And with the experience in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, they knew that people miles away got instant blisters, terrible blisters. And they were looking for something to put in barrels and 5-gallon cans for civil defense if we lost our minds and the Russians and Americans started throwing atomic bombs at each other. Well, because in Indian folklore, they used aloe gel for burns. They were looking at it and they found out if they broke a leaf off the tree and kept it on the desk at room temperature for a week, the healing properties for burns disappeared. And since they couldn't store it in 5-gallon cans and all, they moved on. Well, at Carrington Laboratories, we figured out how to stabilize this acetylated mannose and to be able to freeze dry it and to have the active ingredient in topicals as well as in powder. And yes, if you are trying to make juice like we were doing for those babies in Ethiopia, you want fresh aloe leaves daily. But again, it's a very low percentage of active ingredient. It's about 98 to 99% water, depending on the rainfall and the irrigation cycles. And the dietary supplements, you can put in a capsule or a spoon, what you could take days, and you just can't drink enough to get the active ingredient to your cells unless you're doing it for years, like some of these grandmothers that people tell me about that lived to be 85 and 90 and were never sick because they had eaten fresh aloe leaves for decades.